Are we really halfway through the Rockman series on the Famicom? There have been some long gaps between the other Rockman games, but because Capcom keeps it as a yearly series, we're going to see the rest of them pretty quickly. Although Capcom had been running competitions for kids to design the robot masters since all the way back with Rockman 2, the competition for Rockman 4 had two especially notable things about it. First, there was an actual prize beyond just getting your character in the game. The 8 people who designed the Robot Masters each received a gold Rockman 4 cart. And those cartridges are some of the rarest and most sought-after Famicom collectibles out there. One of the recipients of those gold cartridges was Murata Yusuke. He went on to a very successful career in comics and animation, and these days he's probably best known for his work on One Punch Man. Rockman 4's subtitle is Arata Naru Yabo, or A New Ambition. It gets that title because this game has a new villain. Dr. Wily, of course, died at the end of Rockman 3, which had the subtitle Rockman 3 Dr. Wily no Saigo, or The End of Dr. Wily. And you know they can't just put lies in game subtitles. Besides, why would you assume that Dr. Wily is the villain in Rockman 4? You know what they say about assuming. No, the new villain is Dr. Cossack, a scientist from a suspiciously Russian-looking country, and Dr. Cossack has set out to conquer the world by sending out 8 robot masters to take over cities. And if there's one thing that Rockman knows how to do, it's take down 8 robot masters, steal their weapons, and then fight his way through the castle of the scientist that was controlling them. As a series tradition now, you can choose to take on any of those 8 robot masters in any order. Defeating each of them will give you a weapon based on that robot's theme, and every robot out there is weak to one of the other robot's weapons. And of course on every stage A jumps, B shoots, and pressing start brings up a menu where you can pick which weapon you'd like to use. Rockman can also get a few abilities that help his movement. 3 of those carry forward the forms of the robot dog Rush from the previous game. You start out with the Rush Coil, which will let you spring to high locations, and you'll also get the Rush Jet, which is a platform that you can fly around the screen, and the Rush Marine, which works underwater the same way, though it isn't very good at fitting through gaps and spikes. You can also find a balloon item, which will drop floating platforms down, and a wire which acts as a grappling hook, and I forgot to get while I was playing. For the Robot Masters, it feels like Dr. Cossack. Dr. Wily's definitely not in this one. It feels like Dr. Cossack had to stretch pretty far for robot themes. Toadman has a stage that has a lot of water pushing you around, and when you fight him, he just does a little dance that will make it rain on you. You can interrupt the dance just by shooting him. His rain flash causes a storm on the screen that will damage all enemies. Pharaoh Man is a robot that lives in a pyramid. His shtick is, I'm not really sure. He's vulnerable to getting frozen in place, so you don't really fight him. His weapon, however, is one of the best in the game. It's another chargeable weapon, but it builds a big ball right above your head, so you can hit enemies with the overhead ball and then still shoot it. Hey, who was that? It almost looked like, but it couldn't have been. Skullman is a robot that lives in a palace made of bone, which I'm sure you'll agree is a very normal place for a robot. When you fight him, he sometimes puts up a shield and can't be hurt. You get that same shield if you defeat him, and because it pops the instant anything touches it, it's just about worthless. Brightman has a light bulb for a head and lives in a giant clock. When you fight him, you could be frozen in time at some points, and his weapon lets you do the exact same thing to enemies. Ringman just really likes rings. His stage has an outer space theme with a lot of platforms that slide and vanish. When you're fighting Ringman, he shoots out a boomerang at you, and once you defeat him, you get that same boomerang, though with a lot less range. Diveman is the obligatory underwater stage, and naturally you'll be jumping a lot higher and having to avoid spikes. When fighting Diveman, he fires homing missiles at you. Naturally, you get the exact same homing missiles, but they have a really bad tendency to circle moving enemies. It makes them a lot less effective than you might think. Drillman's stage has a mountainous theme, and when you fight him, he tends to drill into the ground, hide for a while, and eventually pop back up. Defeating Drillman gets you the Drill Missile. It explodes when it hits things and can destroy certain walls, which I think there's only 2 or 3 of in the game. Finally, we have Dustman, who lives in a junkyard, and in battle he tries to suck you up into a vacuum. His Dust Crusher is one of the better weapons in the game. It's a strong shot that explodes into fragments when it hits something. Once you defeat all 8 of the Robot Masters, you go to the castle of Dr. Cossack, and then have to play through some stages that require using all of the skills you developed playing through those first 8. You're given 3 lives when you start, but you have infinite continues, plus there's a password system to let you pick up where you left off. You can find E-tanks on stages that will completely refill your health when you use them from the menu, but the quantity of E-tanks is not stored with the password. Okay, let's cut to the chase here. Rockman 4 is the point where the Rockman series kind of starts going downhill on the Famicom. It's not that it's bad. In fact, the presentation and music make Rockman 4 one of the more appealing Famicom games. But the level design here is a lot less refined. There's a lot of spawning enemies when you jump over pits, for example. Or here, where the screen can scroll forward, shoving you onto spikes. There's a lot more situations in Rockman 4 where you essentially have to know what's coming up in order to get through the area. A lot more precision required in all of your movement, and that winds up making the game a lot less fun. Some people point to the addition of the Charging Mega Blaster, making all of the boss weapons effectively redundant as the real downturn point for the series, but for me it really is the level design that undermines Rockman 4. Another great example of this is the run-up to the final boss. They can only be hurt by 2 different weapons. If you run out of that weapon energy, well, there's 5 enemies that spawn between the beginning of the stage and the boss room. So you'll have to walk back and forth over those enemies for a very long time to recover your energy. It basically feels like Capcom decided to make Rockman 4 a lot harder, but not in ways that were interesting. It's not the worst game to bear the Rockman title on the Famicom. We can wait till next time for that one. But it is a letdown. It would have been an exceptional game from anyone else, but this franchise has some of the best games on the Famicom, and Rockman 4 just isn't up to that.